I'll go one step further. Call me at 801-572-9878. That's my office. And just like Dennis, Celeste, and their family and all the families in Utah, we'll come running.
When an addiction is involved, none of that is applicable.
Hope doesn't apply.
It doesn't.
It doesn't apply.
And parents
like cancer
struggle with
apply.
that. You can't hope this thing away. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today for Recovery Soapbox. Today I have two amazing gentlemen with me in the studio that I've been working very hard to get here for a while now, and I'm just so glad that they finally made it today. So thank you for joining me here. I would appreciate if you just kind of take some time and introduce yourselves and what you'd like to talk about today.
Thank you. We're honored to be with you. I'm LaVar Christensen, attorney and elected state representative, Utah State Legislature, House of Representatives from District 32. That's Sandy, Draper, White City. And then, as you know, we then as a body represent the people of Utah in the House and also in the State Senate. We come together, and here today we're with our dear friend and associate who's been so instrumental in this very issue of House Bill 286, Essential Treatment and Intervention Act. And Dennis can tell you more.
I'm Dennis Cecchini. I'm a parent advocate on issues of substance use disorder, which means I'm not necessarily an expert. The only expertise I have is in losing my son to this disease. So I will have some things to contribute to this discussion.
Absolutely you will. And I can't imagine a greater expert to have with us than someone who's been through the experience that you have.
Appreciate that. Thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
So what we're doing here today as a team and as a group is to basically discuss what is this act, what can people expect from it, especially in the world of recovery. I know we're really excited about this. It's an issue we've been discussing at length between therapists and directors and just owners of businesses like the ones that you guys serve. And I think it's really important that people understand this act and how it is used and how we can best put ourselves into a position to serve those that we love by using this in the way that it was intended.
All across America, the crisis of opioid addiction, prescription drug overdose in many instances, perhaps most instances, it's just a nationwide crisis that all the states, governors, legislatures are now individually on their own trying to find a solution. There have been numerous national conferences. I work closely with Tennessee and New Hampshire and others because they reach out to us. They see what we're doing. Ohio and Kentucky, I think, have been very instrumental in introducing many things. But here at home, it could not be more intimate or more personal. As my dear friend here and associate, the Cecchini family, I would not have known them but for the heart-wrenching nature of this issue. I serve as the representative from District 32 and Sandy Draper, and one of the families there that first came to me 2 years ago, Mark Lewis and his wife Kathy, they had lost their son Tony. And then as I began to meet with them, we held a town meeting that over 400 people came to, and there is where I first met Dennis and Celeste, and they had lost their son Tennyson, and Dennis has just become a profound, passionate, and very effective leader in our state, wanting so badly to make sure that other families can receive the help that he wishes, looking back, that could have been available to them, would have been life-saving for their son. But together, we've been able to make this life-saving for individuals and families throughout our state. I'm just so thankful for the...
I think I have to make it clear, LaVar, that LaVar is not my representative, but LaVar is very passionate about saving lives. And he doesn't do it for votes. He does it for lives. So I very much appreciate that about you.
And Dennis, would you mind also elaborating a little bit on the story that LaVar is highlighting here and kind of what brought you into this parent advocate role?
I'll just quickly talk about my son, and if my voice cracks, I apologize for that. But Tennyson Cecchini was 33 years old when he died of a heroin overdose. He was addicted to opioids and heroin for about 10 years. He had gotten his substance use disorder from a path that most often is the case. He was a hockey player. He was a beautiful skater. And he had a shoulder injury that forced him to go to a doctor. And the doctor prescribed opioids for pain. I don't think they ever really did anything to fix the shoulder, but they did prescribe opioids. And 10 years later, my son was dead on our bathroom floor. My wife and I were forced to watch him die. Now, he had, for a long time, tried to live with that addiction. He was a manager of a medical supply company, a store in Salt Lake City. Tried to function, had a son. But as this addiction does to most people, he lost everything, ended up living in our basement apartment. And that's how we found out, my wife and I, that he was addicted. It's the first time we ever found out. One of the policy issues that is very difficult about this particular disease that makes it much more difficult to help people with than it would be with cancer or diabetes or any other chronic disease is that because a person is an adult, doctors, psychiatrists, they're all prohibited from providing family members or anyone with information about that person's disease. So we weren't aware of his disease until the last 2 years of his life. He tried outpatient therapy and treatment, which did not work. We finally got him into a treatment center, which did not work. In fact, it had more drugs in it than it should have. Let's put it that way. We got him into another treatment center, which was starting to make some headway. My son actually had some psychological problems which caused anxiety, which made it easier for him to continue taking this opioid or opiates. He was actually molested by a babysitter, we found out. Didn't know at the time. When he was 5 or 6, he couldn't quite remember when. So these issues were starting to be worked out at the treatment center. However, after 60 days, he was released from the treatment center. We're not sure exactly why. I have a feeling it was because his insurance no longer wanted to cover him, which is another problematic issue in this disease. And 4 days later, he was dead on the floor of our bathroom. We were sent home without naloxone, without the opioid antagonist that might have saved his life, even though in 2014 it had been allowed to be used by the state legislature with a doctor's prescription. No one told us about it at the treatment center. No one talked us through how to use it. No one gave it to us when we left.
Subsequent legislation now has embraced that wholeheartedly, and it's being made available extensively throughout the state, but in isolation, that could have had the unintended consequence of almost encouraging people to become more overconfident in their use. Mm-hmm. It's easy sometimes to cause the very things you're trying to prevent. So we knew that that wasn't the answer all by itself. And so as Dennis and I began working together 2 years ago in 2015, one of the first steps that we took is that at that time, Utah, and this was with concerned parents and families all over the state of Utah, we needed to obtain, it was the medical association support. They had all kinds of practical concerns. They, with the best of intentions, but they would feel many times like they were overwhelmed or overburdened, and yet other states quickly could see that that the prescriptions were being overdone. You could have more than 100 pills. You could have in over 30 days. It would fall into the hands of other people over time. So they've since pulled back and shortened the time of the prescriptions. But on this issue of naloxone, what Dennis really brought to our attention and we began to really work closely on was the fear of doctor shopping, and that although we at the time we were 4th in the nation as a state in prescription drug overdose deaths, opioid addiction deaths, that we had, at that very time, we actually had, since 2010, one of the best prescription drug registries in America, one of the newest ones, one of the most innovative. And yet the reports from our state officials in our committee meetings testified that, lo and behold, only 10% of the medical community was actually using it. And so in 2016, we worked to pass the first step of legislation that required that the doctors and the pharmacists and the prescribers, that they actually look at and use the registry before filling a prescription to make sure that doctor shopping isn't going on. And that has began to curb it. And then the following year, this year, is when we began to zero in on the problem that Dennis is so tenderly addressing from the most heart-wrenching first-person perspective, that the helplessness and the hopelessness of thinking that your loved one, that the minute they turn 18 and become a legal adult, that somehow from that time on for the rest of their life, that you could know that they're addicted, and yet you do not have any legal standing or capacity to obtain what? Essential treatment and intervention. And so now we had the governor's ceremonial signing just recently in the Gold Room. What a tender moment for all who gathered there. But now, for the first time ever in Utah, loved ones can go into court carrying relatives, and a confidential process, no criminal liability of any type or significance can't be used against you. It's not an admission in any way. You can go in for emergency relief, a 72-hour process, but it's thought through very carefully. All civil liberties were balanced. I was able to work closely with the courts on the judicial side, at the same time work with the medicals. The consensus that it took to tiptoe through this area. But now, thanks to this broadcast, we're trying to reach out and help people know how they can actually implement it, how it can take effect, how it can bless their life, how they can access it, how it can save the lives. And people are coming forward from all over the state and say, would you tell me more? Would you tell me more?
Oh, absolutely. And I noticed too, just out in the work that I do with families, the news is spreading, but it's not spreading in a way that helps them to actually use it.
It's not specific enough.
Yeah, they know that it exists. They've heard, that, there's this new legislation that'll allow me to do what I've always needed and wanted to do. But I think that's what drove me wanting this discussion more than anything else, is the ability to really make that concrete for parents. Here's how it works. Here's how you can make this an actual reality in your life. And here might be some of the obstacles that could get in your way through that process.
And there's administrative rule. I served on the Administrative Rules Review Committee and chaired the Judiciary Committee. And so we interact. I'm so thankful for the many, many co-sponsors and our colleagues in the House of Representatives and the State Senate who we've worked closely together. But I would say for the balance of this year, the interim, what's already underway is that the substance use disorder, our friends, Brent Kelsey and others who have been so instrumental,
from the
Mary
Division,
Leverson,
Substance Abuse and
they've
Mental
come
Health.
forward and helped us. But then meanwhile, the judiciary will be adopting their own rules so that they can properly advise the court so that they know how to proceed with all of this. But the legal obstacles and the legal hurdles have been overcome, and you have standing now, you have capacity. And the bill, I would encourage people to look it up, House Bill 286, 2017 Utah Legislature, but also now through administrative rules, a lot of the specifics, the implementation of it is now unfolding.
How would they look that up?
They could just Google it, but you go to utah.gov,
okay,
and you'll find things there. But if not, I think if you Google 2017 Utah, Utah HB, that means House Bill, Utah HB 286, sponsored by Representative LaVar Christensen, and our Senate sponsor was Stuart Adams. But just looking up that, you'll pull it up and you can read the exact language.
And the Utah.gov site gets you there fairly easy. Just go to legislation and bills.
Okay.
HB 286.
I'll go one step further. Contact Representative Christensen. Call me at 801-572-9878. That's my office. And I would welcome your call. And just like Dennis Celeste and their family and all the families in Utah, we'll come running and we'll help you.
Thank you.
I just want to maybe give parents who might be listening to this an idea of how this is used.
Thank you.
The biggest problem, and there were many with my son's disease, in terms of trying to keep him alive and trying to get him better. But the biggest problem is that we had no status because he was an adult. Mm-hmm. We could not help him. We could not talk to doctors about it. We could not direct. And one thing I think people need to understand, and if this may be your listeners' first experience as a family member with a substance use disorder, the drug hijacks their brain. Their ability to make cognitive decisions that are in their best interest is lost.
Yes.
Because their only ability, their only thought is the ability to stay alive. And to stay alive, they think they need the drug, whether it's alcohol or opioids or any of the drugs that are out there. So what this bill will allow relatives to do, and parents in particular, is to petition the court, the district court, to get their child, and whether they're adults or not, they are still our children, get their child help. Whether that person is able to cognitively accept that help at that particular point or not, and that's why you get driven to that petition point. With my son Tennyson, he was always a precocious, very smart young man, maybe too smart. He thought he could live with this. Mm-hmm. He thought he could stay alive doing this. Yes. And the drug helps him think that. Well, they can't. Eventually, they will make a mistake if they don't get help. So what this allows you to do, and at that particular point when you are so worried that they will die from it, you can get to the court, petition them, ask the court to intervene. And
can you do that alone, or do you need an attorney to walk you through that process?
The rules are being written right now for the petition itself, but the hope is that you could fill out the petition. You might need some direction from the court on how to do that, and they will give you that, I'm sure.
It wasn't meant to create some complex and very costly need for assistance, and that's why we're trying hard to put them in touch with the appropriate state agencies. But let me share with you, and I'm grateful for my own legal background that made it possible for me to understand so clearly, what the issues were. In a prior year, some others had been kind of led down a different road by well-meaning, but it was just an alternative, I guess. But it wasn't the right approach, as it turned out to be the case.
We'd been working on this bill since 2015 when Tennyson died, but other legislators were not able to come up with the concept that was viable, quite frankly.
And so here, I was grateful in helping to write this, but it says to address the serious public health crisis of substance use disorder-related deaths and life-threatening opioid addiction, and to allow and enable caring relatives to seek essential treatment and intervention as may be necessary on behalf of a sufferer of a substance use disorder, the legislature enacts the Essential Treatment and Intervention Act. And then as it begins to unfold, you'll find this as well. A relative seeking essential treatment and intervention for a sufferer of a substance use disorder may file a petition with the district court of the county in which the sufferer of the substance use disorder resides or is found. And then it explains the process and sets it forth.
And relative can mean family of origin or spouse, correct?
Caring relative.
Yes.
And we saw one today that we were talking to through your wonderful recovery center, but they were saying that even their spouse couldn't have ever gone in and gotten them the help that they need. Mm-hmm. It isn't just a parent with an adult child, any loving, caring relative. And then we created a very careful, medically proven and sound process for providing clear and convincing evidence to the courts as quickly as possible that, yes, they have been verified to have the substance use disorder. Yes, they are in need of this. Yes, they would not be likely to obtain it on their own.
And what does that look like exactly? What kind of documentation is this speaking to? Is it just the therapist who they've seen in the past? Is it something? No.
The therapist, the certified SUD analysts, and they could be therapists, they could be psychiatrists.
And SUD is substance
use disorder. Yeah. They would be certified by the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health.
Okay.
They do the same thing right now with physicians and psychiatrists who help them with mental illness.
Okay.
They will have certified people who can make these kinds of determinations, and there would be 2 of them that would have to determine, yes, this individual respondent is in trouble and needs help as quickly as possible.
It
It
also allows for kind of past and future, because it identifies for the court, it says that the petition will set forth, among other things, the factual basis for the statement that establishes the basis for it. At least one specified local substance abuse authority or approved treatment facility or program where the respondent may receive essential treatment. Okay. So you verified it isn't just a euphoric hope that isn't grounded in professional justification and verification. Goes on to say, but then as you go through this, and then it says that the...
But by the way, LaVar, I just want to make clear, Jane, hold that thought for 1 second. The idea here is to protect the respondent's civil liberties.
Right.
We know that is always an issue. That was a difficult part of trying to get this bill written, and getting it to work is this whole idea of allowing that person the opportunity to talk about this in court. They wouldn't be done without them. To get their day in court about all of this. But the other part of it is that the court needs to move expeditiously through this process, and that's part of the bill. It talks about moving as expeditiously as possible to get them help, because we know that time is of the essence.
So once they fill out the petition, does the court supply these representatives
Yes.
that you're talking about?
Yes.
They do, and they oversee
Wonderful.
they oversee the entire process. Okay. And then we have express language that guarantees their rights. All applicable rights guaranteed to a patient under state and federal law shall be guaranteed to an individual who is ordered to undergo essential treatment for a substance use disorder. Extensive confidentiality section indicating that an essential treatment petition, any other documents filed in connection with the petition are confidential and protected. A hearing on an essential treatment petition is closed to the public. Only the following individuals and their legal counsel may be admitted to the hearing. And then it talks about testimony, medical evaluations, the petition, other documents directly related to the adjudication of the petition and presented to the court in the interest of the respondent may not be construed or applied as an admission of guilt to a criminal offense.
Now that becomes highly important, because whenever you're talking about substance use disorder sufferers going before a court, the first thing they think about is a criminal record and jail.
Well,
this is not intended to do that.
And we also pointed out, I emphasized, I was really touched by our Chief Justice Matthew Durant from the Supreme Court when he spoke, as he does usually in the opening week of the legislature, on the state of the judiciary. But he even then himself said, please don't just wait until it's too late. Don't wait till criminal acts have brought people into the system where they need help. He goes, can't we go upstream? And I just spoke to my heart, because that's what I'd been working so hard on all along. And as I toured the prison and did other things, we found that over 80% of all inmates, jail or prison, have a drug history, a drug component of some type, no matter what the crime was that took them there. If they became addicted in some way, then they began to steal, to lie, to do this, to do that. And so to be able to get help in every aspect sooner, but to do it in a way, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The fence at the top of the cliff instead of just the ambulance down below in the valley. And to be able to do this in a way where people can come forward, get the help they need, and not be fearful that they're somehow admitting an addiction. But the prescriptions themselves, we're told that we have here, right now, 80% of heroin users started with prescription drugs. 6 to 8 people a week die from this. I knew of 2 individuals that came to my attention while the bill was being passed in the session. During the 45-day session, we estimate that maybe as many as 40 people died.
Yes.
What if they could, versus where we are now. And then we're told that one prescription drug pill has an $80 street value as a heroin equivalent. This is
which is really important to understand, I think, is because the side of this that drives opiate users into the heroin realm is that price,
that cost,
and they can't maintain it. But hey, we can get you the same high over here for a fraction of the cost. A lot of people don't see that connection. They don't get that that's the bridge that most people are walking down. And so, I really love that this bill targets the brain that's been, we call it hijacked in my field.
Yep.
They are isolating. They're driving everything out of their life that could possibly save them or help them in any way.
Exactly.
And this bill is part of that intervention. It's targeting a symptom of the very disease that's killing them.
Another thing that you might want to know is that there are other areas of the law that are so sensitive. I've been a passionate champion of preventing domestic violence. I can't even comprehend it, honestly, but it happens. It's so real. And in the legal process, there in many areas of the law, there's a 72-hour emergency provision where you can go into court for other things. And the courts know they can act. They'll do it what's called ex parte without even having two sides. In other words, they'll err on the side of immediate action and caution when a child is at risk, whatever the case might be. When there's danger of a foreseeable danger of immediate physical harm, you can run right into court and you can get an immediate protective order of some type for 72 hours. Then you'll be brought in for a hearing, and then they'll go through due process to get to the bottom of things. We were able to incorporate that 72-hour emergency provision into this.
Nice.
And so that's something that you can now do. You can go in. Then beyond that, it just shows how the court watches over this entire process, but they can expedite. Right here it says that if the court determines that the assertions, if true, are sufficient to order the respondent to undergo essential treatment, the court shall set an expedited date for a time-sensitive hearing to determine whether the court should order the respondent to undergo essential treatment for a substance use disorder. But all of the legal measures in due process, they're necessary, and they've been honored, respected, and upheld. I honestly believe that we benefited from looking at many things, but I think that this is so well thought through and so carefully worded and balanced that I think this is a new day for our state, and I could not be more grateful or more optimistic that Utah can address the high-level incidents that we are having. You're going to see them drop, and you're going to see lives saved, and you're going to see families. We had a huge public gathering up at the Capitol, and it was just packed with people, but there was just one sign as I spoke to the large gathering. There were one sign that this one young person was holding up, and it said, "Families heal together." Yes. And I just thought that said it all.
Yeah, because
families heal together.
This is not just a disease that affects one person. Once that person has been infected, the entire system that person is a part of becomes a part of that as well.
It does.
And it affects them in different ways. They become people they've never been before, like hypervigilant, helicopter parents, micromanaging. It resembles a lot of the PTSD responses that we see from people experiencing trauma. And so when they've been through this process for long enough, that trust in their own ability to understand their environment, like to be able to respond responsibly, is taken from them, and they feel lost. Like, I don't know what's real anymore. There's a term called gaslighting that people who struggle with addiction are experts in and don't even know it. Mm-hmm. And it's the art of making the other person feel crazy for the problems that you're creating. Yep. And I think that is what this bill speaks to.
I witnessed also, and I was really touched by this, but I know that you have individuals here that you're helping through this process that are married, a mother of 5, a father of 3, and marriages are being healed and saved. Families are being healed and saved. Little children are getting their moms and dads back home in a better place.
Yes.
I want to talk about the relative issue again, the parent. Mm-hmm. All of what you talked about, Kamrin, is absolutely true. These things that my wife and I went through and did during those 2 years that we understood he had an addiction will haunt us forever. not knowing how to handle this disease, not knowing how to handle the suffering that a person is having, makes you do a lot of things that are mistakes, quite real mistakes.
But from a place of love and
it's a place of love, but it's still a mistake.
Yes.
It doesn't fix the problem. Part of it is we don't know what the problem is until too late. So what I would hope that would happen with this is that the intervention part of this act, in my opinion, is highly important. That's why it's part of the title. The earlier that a relative can help someone with this who does not seem to want to get the help, it's my opinion that the better off they are, including the family.
Oh, absolutely.
To let this go on for very long because they are an adult and you can't seem to help them is no longer the case. Mm-hmm. You can get this help for them through the court, whether they are able to say, yes, I want to go now or not. And to me, the longer that they are addicted, the longer they are in that culture of addiction, the longer they are suffering, and they are suffering. Just go down to Rio Grande sometime and see the suffering that is happening there. Again, that is, to me, not a homeless problem. It's a substance use disorder problem that is being treated as though it's a homeless problem.
I agree.
That's a symptom, not the actual disease.
But what you've touched on is that we had some substantial criminal justice reforms where incarceration isn't the answer necessarily in all instances. And so the legislature found about 50 or so offenses that were downgraded to misdemeanors where they could actually use mental health court to try to get people the help that they need rather than just give up on them and incarcerate them. And again, go back to that reality that 80% or more have a drug history or component. And so you're seeing now that believing in the individual worth of a human being, never give up on them. Yes. Never give up on them. And so we don't just sweep them aside. We get them help that they need. Yes, there's justice and they need to be held accountable. But at the same time, what we're seeing now is that we understand the reasons why these things are happening and what can be done to help them get the help that they need. But can you imagine if everyone from the minute they turned 18 was somehow immune? They were so isolated that no matter how much you love them, no matter how much you care for them, no matter how strong your ties are to them, that somehow the legal system blocked you off and told you that no one but them, but if they're not in the right mental state to be able to see the need for the help that everyone else can see that they need. So to create a process whereby you can professionally, in a state-of-the-art way, verify and establish the accuracy of the assessment and the need for it, and then the means by which they can obtain it. And the people that I'm meeting with and hearing from that are going through recovery services such as those that you provide, they'll tell you when they leave how thankful and grateful. If anything, what Dennis has pointed out is that many of them are, just because of the remaining inherent limitations within our insurance provisions and everything else, some of them are being discharged too soon. They were on the right path, they needed more time, but they were denied the full scope of the treatment that would have been available to them. We're still trying to address those issues, but we're on the right path.
One of the things that the bill does in that regard is that the individual really can't leave the treatment until those certified assessors identify the fact that they are ready to leave.
So that's going to very much impact centers like ours in that way.
But what it will do is ensure that, because my son, I think part of the reason that he was willing to leave, I think he knew he wasn't well yet, but one of the reasons he was willing to leave was because he could. Mm-hmm. And I think what we have to understand is that those kinds of major life-saving decisions are difficult for people to make when they have a substance use disorder.
Absolutely.
And
it's like I have 2 children I adopted who struggle with disabilities. And when they turn 18, I have to go through a whole process to make me legally responsible for their actions and behaviors. And this, albeit temporary, is under that same umbrella. It's, all right, well, you can't do for you what you need to right now.
Right.
And those that can are going to be responsible for a minute.
And we have to understand that civil rights are important, but the right to life is, I think, a little more important. And people who are suffering from a disease need to get the help they need. This isn't a open-ended, kind of term in treatment. The bill does limit the amount of time, but within that amount of time, and it's like 365 days, I think.
There's periodic reviews that are built into it, et cetera. And I just could not and would not accept the Mission Impossible connotation that it seemed like that I was faced with in the beginning. I said, to think that this could not be done. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I just pleaded with the medical association. I said, please, I said, can you help us here? I don't, just tell us what your hurdles are, identify them, and I'll find solutions for it. And then to those that had legal issues, tell me what your objections are. We'll find solutions. And that's what we came up with at the end. But to have just brushed it off and said it can't be done, it can't be done.
When this man gets focused, he's unstoppable. Wow. And that's the attribute about him I love the most. Although his ability to write laws that will work is also something I'm very, very appreciative of. I think if your listeners, if we go on long enough, he'll have read the entire bill for them and they won't have to look it up. But it's important. It's important for them to understand the language, because the language is clear and the language will work.
Yeah, so, and knowing how to incorporate that language into actions they can take, I think is where we really want this podcast to focus.
Exactly. And just, I think that's important too, for just a vote of confidence in the process. The Constitution guarantees what's called a Republican form of government. That isn't a party. That's a very profound principle, that the republic for which it stands. We are a republic, one nation under God. And so when you stop and realize that there's 75 members of the Utah House of Representatives, from the south to the north, from the east to the west. And I'm so thankful. I keep on my desk in the House chamber a little plaque that came from Ronald Reagan, and he kept it on his desk as a governor and then later as a president. And I was fortunate. My dad died many years ago, but as a boy, he was the mayor of our town, and I had wonderful experiences with then Governor Ronald Reagan. Our family's all Pioneer, Utah. But that was a chapter in my early life. But that little plaque says this. It says, there is no limit to the amount of good that can be accomplished or how far a person can go if they don't mind who gets the credit. We don't care who gets the credit. This was a consensus. I'm so thankful that all the fellow members of the legislature that came forward, the deliberative process, it was very difficult. It was very sensitive. There were some, legal issues, profound issues, but to be able to work our way through it and to come forward and to have the support, and it's a committee process, that deliberative process, to go first through a House committee and then to go to the House floor, each time having to have majority approval, and then to the Senate, and then ultimately signed by the governor. But so many emotional moments, so many people came forward, so many families, so many individuals who've been a part of this have just come forward and so tenderly have said, thank you, thank you, thank you, but it's not me. It's just, I'm just so grateful and very proud of our state. There's nothing wrong with Utah in the sense that because we are experiencing this, all the states in America, some are just now barely beginning to kind of address it. But we're very mindful of it. It's been said the biggest room in the world is a room for improvement. We've got more to do.
Yeah, and I think the best part of that being that when parents are faced with this seemingly hopeless situation where no matter how much energy they pump into it, it feels like it's just this endless void that receives none of it, that they can take that same energy, that same passion, that same love, and they can channel it into areas like this. They
it's
can be a part of
wonderfully
something
said.
bigger.
You don't have to give
families
up.
heal
You can help
together.
them.
Yes.
Families heal together.
They do, absolutely. And I just learned today, LaVar, that you were the one that championed those billboards that we see on the
that was
interstate.
Dennis.
I mean, Dennis.
There you go.
Yes.
No, Dennis.
Looking
Well,
at Dennis saying
actually, and my wife will probably listen to this. So my wife, Celeste, one of the things that we were worried about was this idea that naloxone was available but not used, and we didn't know about it. So one of the things my wife said is we need to get that advertised, and she called.
There it is.
And
This
she
is
called
part of what
Reagan.
you see.
Yeah, anybody
This is-
driving down the interstate
This is the
knows that
state.
photo.
This is the
Stop-
state that put this
Stop
together.
the epidemic. Opioid abuse is a Utah epidemic. It's also a national epidemic, and
This
there's
is the division or the Department of Health that has put this together. Celeste actually pioneered with Reagan to get those naloxone billboards up for Utah naloxone so that people understood how to get it and what it did. And those were up for almost a year, in various places. And these are the new ones that are going up. I actually serve on the committee that is helping to put some of this advertising together with Anna Fondario over at the Department of Health, which is doing a wonderful job of trying to get this awareness of the disease that we call, addiction, but it's really a substance use disorder, getting that awareness out to the public so that people who are either suffering from it or families that are suffering with it can get the help they need to overcome this
So
particular
this
problem.
is both sides. When you reach out to this
You bet.
agency, you'll get the support no
You
matter
bet.
who you are.
If
We
you will
don't- we
go to
don't
if you will go to the website for the Opidemic, there are even phone numbers there that you can call to get help on where to go and what you
What
might.
is that website?
It's the Opidemic.
Just
.org.
opidemic.org?
Opidemic.org.
Thank you.
I know Opidemic isn't exact English, but it was done on purpose so people would remember it. But
OPIDEMIC.
there he goes. He's going to read it again. So you won't have to. You won't
And
have to
we,
get
and we
it.
don't we don't want people to just be out there in the dark fumbling and thinking they have to go find an attorney. You won't presently find very many attorneys that even maybe know about this just yet. And
Right.
so that's why I'm so thankful for our state officials in our substance use disorder, departments where they're trying. So
Yeah,
our health,
the
our
Division
health
of Substance
departments-
Abuse and Mental Health is working very hard on these issues. One of the
That doesn't cost you. That's a citizen going to your state officials and asking
just calling them.
calling them. So those are the channels that we're working through right now. They're very speedily trying to work on adopting some of the administrative rules that will implement all of this. Again, it wasn't meant to just create a lengthy and costly legal process. And so I think these phone numbers that you can call are going to be huge.
How does somebody contact their state representative? How would they know who it is or what number to call? Where does that?
Sometimes you can call up to, here's one coming from the source, the one that we often call, but 801-538-1032. That's our Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel, and they can tell you who your individual representative is. You can look it up online.
Okay.
But again, I gave you my office earlier, 801-572-9878. And that's Representative LaVar Christensen, District 32. That's Sandy, Draper, White City, in that area. But again, we're elected by our own individuals in our district, but then we're sent to the state as a whole. And each district is asked to send their best representative for the good of the entire state. And we all have our strengths in different fields that we can help and contribute. So we just want to connect with everyone far and wide and help them immediately reap the benefits of this.
One thing also is the Utah.gov site is a pretty informative site. It's rather well done. I don't know if you've used it enough.
I've used it for licensing
Yeah.
issues. Yeah.
Well, you can get on Utah.gov and you can go to the legislature, and you can also find what district you're in and who your representatives are if you don't know who they are. And I
Thank you.
would urge everyone to know who their representatives are.
Some
And-
also use, they have an alternative that's utah.le.gov
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
But I think you'll be fine with just
Absolutely.
utah.gov is kind of the shortcut, but it'll then branch out. and take
LE will
where
get you
need
to the
go.
legislature
Oh,
part
I
of it.
see.
Um,
So if we can, just for a minute, we've put out a lot of information here. So what I'd like to do is say, if I'm a parent and I've got an adult child that I think could benefit from this law, my first step would be to reach out to the court and to fill out that petition.
To their district court.
But
Or
if you
would
need-
there
but
be
if-
a
but if you
preliminary
needed
step
help-
to that?
No, but if you don't have someone immediately that knows how to do that because it's so new, then I think maybe calling the Utah officials that you've mentioned through our
The Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, by legislation, is spearheading the rules that will govern how this is implemented, how the bill is implemented. And I should make it clear, too, that I'm not sure when this podcast will air, but from May 17th, which was the governor's signing, there will be about a 60-day period until this bill will be available, because the rules will not be written until then. They're working on them right now, and LaVar is going to help with that.
Know.
That's
Yeah.
important. So I'm afraid you can't do it right now. But
that's our continued work that we're in the middle of right now,
But once that happens, you can contact the Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. You can call LaVar. He gave you his number.
That's right.
You can also call the Department of Health, because they will be helping to administer it also. The division is a division of the Department of Health. And you can also call your district court to ask about how the petition will work. Hopefully, there will be information on this website
Yes.
that will, on the Opidemic website, that will help you get to where you need to be in order to get that petition and in order to get to the court to do what
Like
you
a
need to do.
step-by-step process.
Right.
Like start here, then go
Start
here,
here, go to there,
beautiful.
and
That's
that's the ultimate goal, is that will just be on the website so
Yeah.
you can get it done.
Well, and what I know about working with the government in general is that depending on how fast the information has been disseminated and how the person you're talking to has paid attention to that information or assimilated that information, you could get very different directives depending on who you're talking to at what point in time. And so I really appreciate the fact that you gave those multiple sites to address, because what I would recommend and strongly encourage any parent going through this process to do is to get your information from as many people as possible and not take just the first person that you've spoken with at their word, that there are many layers to what's going on here, and to understand the issue from each of those angles
That's
before
important.
moving forward.
That's
remember also that the term, although as Dennis and Celeste experienced, and which is probably by far the most common fact pattern, a parent with an adult child, can you imagine being 18 years and 1 month, maybe still in high school, and you can't get them the help they need.
Yeah.
But then it escalates, and now all of a sudden they're 31, they're 32. But keep in mind that the scope of this is caring relatives. And as I saw someone today who actually, it was their spouse that would have wanted to save her marriage and save the family and get her husband the help he needed, or whatever the case might be, or mothers after multiple pregnancies and some of the medications that flowed from all of that, and then somehow not getting the proper attention or professional recommendations and advice, but overprescribed. There's all kinds of individualized, very sensitive individual paths to this situation, but where they all converge in this act is that caring relatives now have a confidential, accelerated, sensitive process whereby they can obtain immediate legal standing, recognized authority to request and petition for essential treatment, intervention.
Yeah, and when a parent hears that after they've been struggling for years to find some semblance of control in an otherwise chaotic situation, that would be manna from heaven, I can imagine. Just
I know
what they've been searching for so very long.
It was so frustrating for my wife and I, because obviously, like any parent, we loved our child a lot. And to have to watch them suffer like that and not be able to do anything when you know that they aren't doing anything for themselves, they can't do it anymore. It's just a horrible thing. So I would urge parents and relatives to never give up on a substance use disorder sufferer. They don't want to do this. They hate it. It is a disease. Change your paradigm thinking about it. It's not their fault. There
They
are
look
issues.
like choices they're making.
It's not a choice.
These are not choices.
It's not a choice.
Yes.
And they would do anything if they could get off of that drug and stay off that drug. The question, and not the question, but the real thing we have to do is do the anything.
And
Don't
I think
give
the
up.
hardest part for that doing anything piece is what I see parents going through is that piece that says, I think I'm dealing with my child right now, but
I'm not.
They're really dealing with the full-blown addiction,
That's it.
the disease
That's
part
it.
of that child. So you'll see a reaction that is explosive and that is angry and full of venom
Yep.
and toxicity. And you'll think like, oh, I don't want to upset him anymore. And oh, I don't want to force him into treatment because, look at what this is doing. And it's just going to drive him further into that addiction. And so it keeps people from intervening at the stages that you're talking about, those early stages upstream or on the cliff before it happens. And they're just thinking, well, just a few more interventions or this time it'll
What a
work if we
great
just
point.
throw enough money at it, right? Like, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to send my kid to go to a tropical paradise and he won't have access to drugs, but he'll see that life is worth living. Like, they
Doesn't
just
work.
keep seeing that
Yep.
end of the rainbow just right there.
Right.
And no matter how much they grab at it, it continues to elude them. And they don't realize that instead of doing those things, this is the step that they should be taking.
It's interesting to me that with substance use disorder, it's probably the only disease that we attempt to, as a society, handle without treatment. If someone had cancer,
Yes.
what would we do?
Send
Immediately
them
get to a doctor,
immediately.
immediately get the best treatment we can find. Diabetes, any chronic disease, we would get them the best treatment we can find. And your point is well taken that as a relative, to continue to hope that something will change doesn't mean it's going to change. The only thing that will help it change is to intervene in this person's disorder and help that person get the treatment that will help them. It might be different in all cases for people. I realize that. People are different.
Yes.
But the court certified assessors will help you discern that, will help you figure that out. I do want to make it clear, too, that as part of the bill, the petitioner will be responsible to ensure that the payment for the treatment is taken care of.
Very
The
good
state
point.
will not assume that. We're not trying to burden taxpayers with more of an issue. We are trying to ensure that people can get the treatment they need. And so the petitioner will have to assume that. But I am sure my wife and I never thought about the money. It was trying to get him the help he needed to stay alive. And obviously we failed, but that's from a stance of not having the knowledge. We're trying to make sure that people get the knowledge and get the help they need. We couldn't do this for him, HB 286.
And what I hear you saying too is that, and this is a shout out to all of the members of the group that I facilitate every week for family members, is they become so addicted to hope.
Yep.
that becomes their drug. So when their family member is up, they're up. When they're down, they're down.
Yeah.
They feel so backwards in their own life, and all of the interventions that they're trying that would typically work. If we throw enough love at this, if we throw enough support at this, then it will get better. And when an addiction is involved, none of that is applicable.
Hope doesn't apply.
It doesn't.
It doesn't apply.
And parents
It's like with cancer, it
struggle
doesn't
with
apply.
that. You can't hope this thing away in any shape or form.
This, I apologize if this is making noise, but this watch is Tennyson's watch. And you brought up a point about hope. I remember, and I squeeze it sometimes when I'm thinking
I've noticed.
about this, but you brought up the point about parents constantly hoping. Mm-hmm. I can remember sitting in a group therapy session with him, and the therapist asked, "Dennis, how are you feeling right now?" The words that came out of my mouth immediately were hopeful. Well, hopeful only goes so far. Treatment is absolutely essential, and continued treatment until they are ready to move into an outpatient program that will continue their recovery. Do not forget that. And do not forget your naloxone when they leave. Relapses happen. You have to shift your paradigm thinking about a relapse as a bad thing that's never going to happen. It happens.
Well, and it's a delicate balance because you've got the family on one side saying, well, my addicted family member is coming to me saying, oh, we just expect addiction. It's going to come, that's part of the process. And the family hears that as you're just giving me one more excuse, one more reason to distrust you. And it's this constant fight that I've seen. And when I look at it, the resolution, that place in the middle where both are accurate and both are true, is what we're all trying to get to here with actions like this.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. This is part of the process and you will relapse. But someone who is actually in recovery doesn't use that as an excuse.
No.
Only the addicted part of them will try to use
do
that.
It. You bet. So remember, you're not dealing necessarily with the same person you gave birth to. They will come back. They will come back.
They're in there. They're
but
always
you have
in
to help
there.
them.
Yes.
You have to help them come back.
In the legislative process, every piece of proposed legislation receives or may receive what's called a fiscal note. And there's a financial analyst office where they'll go through, and it's part of our prudence as a state. We've been recognized as the best managed state. We have many wonderful success in that regard for just being so financially prudent. We wished we had unlimited financial capacity. We were able to raise public education funding to the highest in years, but still not enough. And again, many people could talk forever about the burden that we have from the federal taxation levels that are just robbing us at the state level of the resources we need. But if a bill like this had been attempted, and if it all hinged on the availability of tax dollars, 8 people would continue to die indefinitely week after week after week.
Right.
So it was very critical that we were able to say it isn't perfect. It's a wonderful giant step forward. We wish there was unlimited financial capacity. I was very grateful that the court system, for example, they could have, every single one that has to weigh in on it, they could have said, oh, well, this is going to require a few more court hearings or this or that. We tiptoed through all of that. That when I mentioned earlier that I asked him, what are your obstacles? What are your objections? Identify them and we'll solve them. Mm-hmm. Where there's a will, there's a way. Just tell me what stands in the way and we'll take care of it. And so, yes, there is a financial element here. But again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. To do it now up front, like Chief Justice Durant so wisely admonished, was he said, don't wait till the criminal justice system just continues to unfold. It could have been solved earlier. We were on notice. Red flags everywhere. And again, families heal together. And just my own one personal comment is that when a person goes through this severe moment, it's a very humbling moment. It's a time when they're reachable and they're teachable. And when things get really confusing and depressing, I think you step back and ask yourself, what do we know for sure? What do we know for sure? If there was ever a time to humbly ask yourself, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? What is this life all about? And I had a phenomenal teacher my senior year of high school. She used to have over her chalkboard, she had signs everywhere, but it said think. But one that I'll always cherish, next to it she had by a German poet. It was a translated English version of a poem called Questions, or By the Sea, by a German poet named Heinrich Heine, Heine. Look it up. But paraphrasing, he said, by the sea, a young man stands, full of doubts, full of questions. He said, what is man that thou art mindful of him? As he looks up at the heavens. He said, these are questions that have stumped the minds of many men of many ages, men with powdered wigs, men with turbans, men from all time. He says, and the tide goes out, and the tide comes in, and a young man waits for his answer. Well, you deal with it in the recovery center, people asking questions, and I'm just so thankful again that families heal together, but I think it's a time, an opportunity to come back and to learn and to go away with a more, where does hope come from? I think it comes from faith. Faith and hope are so closely connected, but truth is everything. And when you build your life on the sure foundation of truth, they say wise men learn from their experiences, and wiser men don't have to. Well, we all have to. We all need to, and we all benefit from it. But that's just a personal side, probably irrelevant maybe to the things that are being discussed today. I don't know.
I always ask at the end of the podcast, what is your message to the world about this topic and what we've been discussing? And so you beat me to the punchline on that one.
Well, mine would be prayerful, and the teachings of Jesus. But when he said the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, yes, there's that tension. There's that little tug of war. But these problems can be overcome, and the joy and happiness of life, to know the truth, and the peace and the joy and the strength, the confidence and the courage that comes from that is the greatest medicine of all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What about you, Dennis? What concluding message would you like to deliver?
I probably can't be as eloquent as LaVar, but my concluding message is just that there are a lot of issues involved in this particular disease. Issues that were born out of paradigms that were obviously erroneous in terms of what starts the disease or why the person has the disease. There are several issues that need to be worked on, and the intervention, the Essential Treatment and Intervention Act, is one of those tools in the box to try to help people stay alive. And all I would ask is that people don't give up, use the tools that are available. The Naloxone's available. There will be legislative items that will come up in the future, I am sure, about insurance to help smooth out how people can get into treatment with their insurance, so they don't have to, go crazy about trying to get it paid for. And treatment centers will be able to take that insurance without a problem. Hopefully those things will be done very, very shortly, but please use the tools that are available to you now. HB 286 is one of those, and it can help save lives. Please keep your children alive. Please.
Thank you, Dennis. And I just want to very quickly speak to the families as well. I run a community group every week that anyone can attend. And what I find most helpful about that setting is that parents are able to come and to see that they're not alone, that they're not crazy like they think they are, and that in spite of their greatest efforts to make this thing go away, that they are not a failure because it didn't. And watching that hope come into an appropriate application and to start to be integrated in a way that says, I can hope that I will see a better day. I can hope that I will heal from this. That's appropriate use of hope.
Yes.
And being able to watch the light come on inside of them and to get their power back and to reclaim their position in a reality that makes sense to them after being so lost for so long is one of my greatest rewards in the work that I'm able to do. And so I would just encourage every parent to get involved in a group of some kind. Don't do this alone. You're not alone, and you don't have to do this by yourself. So reach out and find out what you have available to you in your area and start the conversation.
USARA in Salt Lake is another group that does help families that way. So I'm sure they have a website. You can look
yes,
them up.
USARA, there's Al-Anon.
And I'm sure you do a wonderful job of it. I've enjoyed speaking with you about this issue.
Thank you, Dennis.
I'm glad there are people who have a real knowledge and a real passion to help.
I think that free introductory, open to the public community meeting that you hold weekly is an amazing and generous invitation. If someone was just out there wondering, who do I call, who do I talk to, what do I do, what a great opportunity that they could just come and participate in, much like we have today. But that would be a real eye-opener and would give them all kinds of options that they're searching for and hoping for.
Yeah, and it's just one of many. There are so many out there that you can reach out to and take advantage of. So thank you. And I just want to conclude by saying we appreciate your time today. We know that it's very valuable, and
Thank you.
drove a long way to be here with us, and we appreciate that effort. And getting this information out, I felt, was so vital to the work that I'm doing that I couldn't rest until I had you guys in here. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you for being so alert and attentive
Yes.
and quick to see the merits of all this, and we're grateful to spread the word. Thanks for helping us do it.
You're so
Thank you very
welcome.
much.
And for those of you that want to catch this or disseminate it to the community as well, please visit us on iTunes and Stitcher, or on YouTube and Google Play. You can also visit just Soapbox, Recovery Soapbox, and all of the podcasts that we've done are there as well. And just take care of yourselves
Very good.
and
Thank
your
you.
loved ones.
Thank you.